Ryan Alexander and my latest Trump and Academia vlog report. If you're new to this series, these videos are where I summarize what the Trump administration has been doing to higher education and how colleges and universities have responded. It's been too long since my last video, as I've been traveling for work as well as for our 32nd wedding anniversary. But the Trump administration hasn't stopped its campaign against colleges and universities, and so I'm back now with plenty to cover. Actually, there's too much to cover for one episode. I'll save the big beautiful bill and Harvard developments for the next episode. I'm recording this on a Friday night, which isn't the best time, but the work needs to be done. In the meantime, please like, subscribe, and share these videos so that we can get the word out and so that I can keep making them. Here are the latest developments since the last video as of today, July 11th, 2025. I've organized items into two categories today: actions on the federal level and academic responses. There'll be copious links in the show notes, including a link to the playlist for all episodes in this series. Let's begin at the federal level and start with the Department of Justice, which, while investigating the University of Virginia over charges of anti-Semitism, compelled that institution's president, James Ryan, to resign. In a statement, Ryan explained himself thus: "To make a long story short, I am inclined to fight for what I believe in, and I believe deeply in this university. I cannot make a unilateral decision to fight the federal government in order to save my own job. To do so would not only be quixotic, but appear selfish and self-centered to the hundreds of employees who would lose their jobs, the researchers who would lose their funding, and the hundreds of students who could lose financial aid or have their visas withheld." Unquote. The Justice Department also sued the University of California system for allowing trans women to play on women's athletics teams. Along similar lines, the Department of Education, which Trump has yet to actually close despite his best efforts to do so, has been very busy indeed. Its Office for Civil Rights opened two investigations into George Mason University, one over charges of anti-Semitism and another for Title VI violations. Mason's president, Gregory Washington, told ProPublica that he felt targeted, not just because he's also in Virginia, which just lost its president, but because conservative media outlets called for his resignation even before the Office of Civil Rights publicly announced its actions in Target. The Office of Civil Rights also claimed that Columbia University should lose accreditation, finding it violated federal civil rights law. Now, the OCR does not have the ability to withdraw institutional accreditation, but it did ask Columbia's actual accreditor, the Middle States Commission on Higher Education, to do so. Middle States then, quote, warned the institution that its accreditation may be in jeopardy because of insufficient evidence that the institution is currently in compliance with Standard 2, Ethics and Integrity, unquote. The Education Department also had the University of Pennsylvania enter into a resolution agreement over trans athletics. The agreement contains multiple provisions restricting athletic play to students based on their birth sex, plus requiring the university to send individual apologies to swimmers on a team which had a trans colleague. Department of Education layoffs are starting to have some impacts, as some financial aid officers report the system is starting to fray. Responses from the Office of Federal Student Aid are taking longer and sometimes never appear. Elsewhere in the federal government, the White House Office of Management and Budget has told NASA to end some science missions, and the space agency started to do so, ordering team leaders to prepare closeout plans. However, a bipartisan Senate committee voted more than $7 billion in funding to keep them going. Now, several hundred current and former Environmental Protection Agency employees signed a public letter criticizing the Trump administration's science cuts and its policies. In response, the E.P.A. suspended 144 of them. The E.P.A.'s press secretary stated that, quote, "The Environmental Protection Agency has a zero-tolerance policy for career bureaucrats unlawfully undermining, sabotaging, and undercutting the administration's agenda as voted for by the great people of this country last November," unquote. Elsewhere in the federal government, the National Science Foundation has terminated more than 100 climate science studies, according to MIT's Technology Review. Quote, "Affected projects include efforts to develop cleaner fuels, measure methane emissions, improve understanding of how heat waves and sea level rise disproportionately harm marginalized groups, and help communities transition to sustainable energy," according to an MIT Technology Review of a GrantWatch database, unquote. The National Institutes of Health Director, Jay Bhattacharya, called for cutting federal support for scholarly publishing systems which make published papers publicly available. One of the National Institutes of Health, the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, ended funding for 5 major vaccine efforts, including support for 2 major consortia working on HIV vaccines. In the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, its climate.gov website may cease to add new content, as many staff have been fired. Elsewhere in the federal government, the National Endowment for the Humanities cut, among other things, support to the Mark Twain Papers and Project, which may now be in danger. The Department of State announced it would require consular officers to scan international students' online presence for, quote, any indications of hostility towards the citizens, culture, government, institutions, or founding principles of the United States, and advocacy for, aid, or support for foreign terrorists and other threats to U.S. national security, along with support for unlawful anti-Semitic harassment or violence, unquote. Turning to the topic of international student revocations and deportations, it's unclear what's happening now. Detentions may have decreased, but it's also summer when students are less likely to be on campus. There are incidents, there are stories. For example, Utah police detained a University of Utah student after a traffic stop. There were also developments involving individual detainees. A federal district judge finally released Mahmoud Khalil from detention, and he is now suing the Trump administration for $20 million. Khalil's story now has its own Wikipedia page. Overall, many of us fear that international student enrollment in American colleges and universities will shrink this fall, which could cause a serious hit to institutional finances. Britain's Financial Times did some calculations. Quote, 3/4 of universities surveyed in recent weeks by NASFA, or network of organizations engaged in international education exchanges, anticipate a fall in international student numbers this year, with the majority expecting a drop of at least 10%. That would represent a hit of nearly $900 million in direct revenues, based on an estimate by Shoreline Analytics, an educational consultation, of $8.6 billion in total fees from international students incoming. A similar 10% drop across all existing foreign students would create a $3 billion gross hit, based on Financial Times calculations of $29.5 billion in enrollment and average tuition figures from NCES. The Secretary of the Department of Health and Human Services, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., called for government scientists to no longer publish in leading journals. Instead, HHS might launch its own. Elsewhere, the Trump administration cut subscriptions to Springer Nature journals across numerous offices, with Axios reporting that, quote, about $20 million in grants covering subscriptions have been cut, with billions more being evaluated, unquote. Shifting to Congress, the House Committee on Education and Workforce will hold hearings on academic anti-Semitism with leaders of Cal Poly, San Luis Obispo, and the University of California, Berkeley. The House Judiciary Committee subpoenaed presidents of Brown University and the University of Pennsylvania over rising tuition. Now let's turn to academic reactions. There has been a lot of academic silence in response to the Trump administration's actions, as well as silence from academically adjacent people and enterprises. But there's also protest, resistance, and some legal actions. There have been more budget and staffing cuts. The University of Pittsburgh rebranded its Office for Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion as an Office of Institutional Engagement and Well-Being in response to Trump administration financial pressures. A professor resigned from the Naval War College. Pauline Shanks-Corin explained that she could no longer teach military ethics in this political climate. And I'll quote from the Atlantic Monthly. Orders from President Donald Trump and Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth, she said, have made staying both morally and practically untenable. Remaining on the faculty, she believes, would mean implicitly lending her approval to policies she cannot support. And she said that the kind of teaching and research the Navy once hired her to do will now be impossible, unquote. The Mellon Foundation appointed Carla Hayden to a senior fellow position. Viewers may recall Hayden was the Librarian of Congress from 2016 until this past May when Trump fired her. At Mellon, she will, quote, pursue scholarship, writing, and research projects while also serving as a strategic partner and counsel, working in collaboration with the Foundation leadership and staff, advising on opportunities to support and advance libraries, archives, and other organizations in the public knowledge ecosystem, unquote. Meanwhile, the entire Fulbright Foreign Scholarship Board walked out to protest the Trump administration's actions. Now, elsewhere in the world, there have been further international echoes and responses. Franklin University of Switzerland made available roughly 40 spots for international students who could no longer return to the United States for post-secondary study. An Australian international student placement company, IDP Education, saw its share value plummet. That is partly due to American visa challenges. Okay, to summarize, the Trump administration is continuing to go after higher education through multiple government offices and in many ways, from funding cuts, deportations, interfering in several universities' autonomy, and firing or getting fired university presidents. Academics are feeling impacts across the nation and elsewhere in the world. Academic community responses are growing, from issuing statements and holding demonstrations to filing lawsuits and hiring people. I hope this video summary has been of use to you. Please share your thoughts, additions, and other reactions in the comment box below. If you don't feel you can comment publicly, please reach out to me directly through the contact link at the end of today's show notes, as some people have already been doing. Given the pace of events, I'll try to post these videos more frequently. This is a rough, dark time for those of us in higher education. It seems likely to get worse. I hope we can help each other out and fight. Please take care, everyone.